know it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Welcome to Eat, Pray, Run, where slow food in the apocalypse doesn't mean you're ending up on the menu. I hope you brought your appetites. I'm Dr. Erica O'Neill, a researcher in the Lincoln Center for Applied Ethics at Arizona State University. And today we're talking food sharing between humans and maybe the undead with Diego Guevara Beltran before shifting to explore the possibilities of vegan brain alternatives with Gwyneth Gordon. But first, I want to introduce the host of Eat, Pray, Run, Mr. Rob Dunn. Dr. Rob Dunn is a Reynolds Professor in the Department of Applied Ecology at North Carolina State University and a Professor of Human Biodiversity in the Center for Evolutionary Hologenomics at the University of Copenhagen. Rob, can you tell us a bit about the juicy topics we're going to sink our teeth into today?
Today we get to talk about food sharing, empathy, and how to tell if the vegan that's in your house, or the vegan that's in your house, how to tell if the zombie that's in your house is a vegan. Or how to tell if the vegan in your house is a zombie. Either way, we'll do both of those.
Either way, that seems important to know. So let's bring on our first guest, Diego Guevara Beltran, PhD student in the Department of Psychology at Arizona State University. Welcome, Diego. I barely made it into the studio today. How are you riding out the apocalypse?
Hi, Erica. Hi, Rob. I'm doing okay. I barely see the sunlight. People tell me it's hot out there, but I'm not really sure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show, Diego. Diego, you study food sharing. Can you tell us about what do we know about food sharing during the apocalypse or ordinary times? What do we still have to figure out? And how do we make sense of who is and isn't sharing food with us in these moments?
Yeah. So I'll start with how food sharing kind of looks like maybe during non-apocalyptic times. So part of the impetus for me of studying this is the fact that a lot of people talk about the origins of altruism in food sharing and the fact that people in our ancestral past had to share food to get enough calories in, basically. But if you look at societies today, like the United States or just abundant societies where we have a surplus of food, people still attach a lot of meaning to food sharing. So things like, forming identities, building trust. There's some cool work showing that firefighters who cook and eat together have better work performance than firefighters who don't eat together. And some more recent work showing that if you just put strangers in the same room and you make them eat chips and salsa back and forth a little bit, they'll cooperate more and coordinate more in things like economic games in the lab.
Oh, that's interesting. So even if I've got a lot of food and you've got a lot of food, the act of my sharing some of my excess with you still has a lot of social consequences.
Well, we don't know that yet. People haven't done that experimentally. We actually, Dr. Activist and I and other colleagues were going to try doing that in the lab, but then the apocalypse has hit, so we couldn't bring people into the lab and manipulate, say, the abundance of food. But if you give people an equal amount of resource and you put them in the middle of them and they go back and forth, that seems to increase cooperation and trust a little bit.
So if we're around a circle and we've got food in the middle, we're going to cooperate more than if we're around a circle and there's nothing in the middle?
So the work that people have done in that case, they weren't looking at the ecology of food. So they were just looking at food as any kind of coordination that can happen between two people. We started to look at what happens when you compare food sharing to other kinds of sharing. And we actually don't find that people increase cooperation in our studies. We actually found the opposite. That people don't seem to like to share sometimes when they share food.
So do we know anything about how food sharing changes when times are hard? And so does it mean something different if we collectively don't have much food and are sharing? Like in the apocalypse, like when the zombies are at the door, we've run out of cheese, we've run out of milk. All we've got is like a few of those candy corns, which aren't that good to start with. But when there's nothing left, they're pretty valuable.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're hungry, I'm sure they're delicious. They're definitely at the bottom of the pile. But so I can tell a little bit about, it sort of happens that food sharing is more prevalent when it's harder to get, right? So there's a lot of variance in subsistence societies because hunting is hard, and even the most skilled hunters are just going to be unlucky or get injured or whatever may happen. So even the most skilled hunters are likely not ever going to be successful, or likely going to have, or they do have low return rates, even if they put in all the hours that you can possibly put in. So when it's hard to get, what happens is that people pull food, right? There's central food sharing that anthropologists call. And so it doesn't matter if you don't get it today, because somebody in your group is likely to gonna get a hit on any given day. But if you can just get food on your own, because it's just there, like plucking a fruit or something that's easy, there's just no need to share at all. So sharing, at least in terms of meat, which is the primary source of calories for hunter-gatherers, is actually more likely to happen when it's harder to get.
Oh, that's super interesting. And do we know anything about who it is that doesn't share? Like, so what determines who the jerk is? Like, who is it that's got the honey under their hammock and like the little piece of monkey leg that they didn't tell anybody else about?
It's really hard to hide food in subsistence ecologies because you're kind of out and about. But there is, I don't know whether people have done things like measure, like, lack of conscientiousness and how that reflects to food sharing. But you see them on the Hadza, for example. There's some work that Dr. Besk did on the Hadza where, men, when they go eat out to collect food, they eat first before they share, which kind of makes sense, right? You have to take care of yourself before you can share with anybody else. But it's not that people are being stingy or selfish. It's just the way it goes.
Well, but that's a little bit like sneaking it, right? Because it's like, let me just put a bunch of this in my stomach and then I'm going to go share.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know what those people's intentions are. I feel like it's more about how we interpret their behavior.
Yeah.
To lead to one conclusion over the other. But often, people always bring surplus, and it's hard to hide it. And there's real social negative consequences to people who don't like sharing. Although I do think it's interesting, even there's some qualitative work suggesting that even today, people who see other people eating alone have negative impressions about them.
So if I'm walking down the street and I see you out there eating cheese, I might just not. I might think you're the kind of guy that I wouldn't share cheese with because you've. Yeah.
That's just qualitative work.
So we have a question from our audience, which is, how does game theory play into this? Are there cheaters? Are there copycats? Is there a theory for how you win in these situations, or is that a good framework for thinking about this? That sounds like a general's question for your thesis, I will say, but yeah, I'd like to hear your answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't tell you exactly how the dynamics play out because I'm not a formal theorist. But
it's the apocalypse, man. You got to be everything. It's like there's not time to figure out like where's the specialist. Like, you're the guy we got.
Look, I'll throw you some regressions and maybe some factor analysis here and there, but that's, I'm social psychology around. Everything's a 2x2. But so in terms of the game theory stuff, yeah, there's cheaters. And it's going to depend on if you're a cheater in a subsistence ecology and you're not sharing, people still will share with you. This is what we see in subsistence ecologies, but they will share with you somewhat less. And some work by Kim Hill and Kaplan back in the 1980s with the Aceh, South America, they find that people who share all foods with other people eat 80% more calories than people who don't share anything at all. So it doesn't bode well to be a cheater or a defector in subsistence ecologies.
What about disgust? So one of the questions that just came in was about how, let's imagine that I have a really low disgust threshold, and so I'm very likely to find things disgusting. Does that change the role I play in sharing? I can imagine the one sort of grubby knuckled uncle is just passed me some palm wine, and my disgust threshold has been passed.
Yeah, that's a perfect question or a segue to some of the work that Dr. Activist and I have done recently. If you don't mind, we're still talking here about before I do that, sorry. But yes, so in some of the work that we've done, we started to find that people's disgust to human contamination specifically, so like, Rob, if you and I are sharing or eating and you happen to touch my food or dip your fries in my cheese or whatever it may be, And if I have a high disgust, I don't like sharing just in general with people. I don't enjoy sharing food with others. I don't like having family style meals, those kinds of things.
So, so could the evolution of disgust change the evolution of sharing? And I noticed Erica just popped in, which means I think we've got a transition happening here, but we can come back to this.
We do, but we also have a general discussion where we can all kind of chat about that topic together. But at the moment, I need to introduce our next guest. Diego, thank you. Please stay in the studio so we can bring you back in for a chat. Our next guest is Gwyneth Gordon. And Dr. Gordon was an assistant research professor in the School of Earth and Space Exploration at Arizona State University before she was bit. Welcome to the show, Gwyneth. How is Undead Life treating you?
Whoa. Hey, Gwyneth.
Hi. Thank you very much for the introduction. Yeah, it's kind of ironic that I'm in this current state. The tagline for my research used to be, "You are what and where you eat." And I've had to modify that to include who you eat. But in the before times, what I really did is I studied the validity of various tools that are often used in anthropology to understand dietary preferences in people. So these are isotopic signatures that are present in the tissues of all people and animals, and you can understand something about what kinds of foods people or animals are eating and where they're from.
So if we took a blood draw of you as a zombie, could we figure out what you've been eating? Is this a possible thing? I could know if you're like the kind of zombie that's going to eat my kind of brain.
Definitely. And that's one thing that I've been very actively interested in. So one of the things that's really cool is you can, by looking at different tissues, you can actually create kind of an isotopic life history for an individual. So for instance, teeth form in utero up to about age 18, and they'll tell you something about a person's birthplace, very early life. Bones are a dynamic tissue that turn over that will tell you about the last 10 to 20 years of life. Mm-hmm. And hair is going to grow out at the rate it grows. Zombies, their hair still grows, just as I have learned recently. And so then you can tell what recent diet has done.
And so with you, we could watch that transition to zombie life and the switch to, I mean, I don't mean to make this personal, but the switch to eating brains, I suppose. Is this what you've been eating, or can
yes.
I ask?
No, well, that's one of the other things I've been looking into is what are, non-homicidal, alternatives to brains. And there's some precedent for this. So for instance, one condition that actually ends up being increasing trophic level is basically is anorexics. So when you're anorexic, you're starving and you start digesting your own proteins. And so you essentially move up trophic levels. So you can actually look in the hair of anorexics and you can watch as they, if they're hospitalized, as they begin to recover and move down trophic level, essentially. Newborns are essentially the same thing. You can also look at weaning patterns as they become less cannibalistic, as they stop feeding off their mothers.
And so you would see the same kind of transition in your own body with this dietary transition. I will note that you're being lovingly heckled by our audience, who I think is not familiar with having the chance to talk to a zombie, but appreciates your candor and really your zombie thoughtfulness. And so we're grateful to have you here. This is not and one of our listeners notes you're very fluent speaker for a zombie, not so much of the which we're really accustomed to.
Yeah, well, one of the things how I became a zombie was, during the COVID-19 pandemic, masks became very difficult to get. And when I'm doing my research, I worked with modern skeletal collections. Typically, you want to use very specialized masks to, protect yourself. And they were simply unavailable. And I'm afraid I was a little too dedicated.
Oh, that's
personal protective equipment is very, very important.
But on the other hand, like it seems like you have a rich life as a zombie. It doesn't seem like it's been all terrible. mean, should we have empathy for you as a zombie? I mean, my personal experiences with zombies have not been great, I'll say.
Yes.
But I'm enjoying this conversation. And I mean, how should we feel about zombies? What should this relationship be like?
Well, I think I've recently come to a more empathetic view of zombies, and it's like people, right? There are people who are murderers, there are people who are serial killers, but there are also people who are good people, and so I think if you're faced with a large horde, there may not be any alternative except to pretty much wholesale slaughter, but in more individual cases, I'd like to think that there is the possibility for coexistence.
Can we imagine food? I mean, going back to the conversation, I don't know if you saw the conversation with Diego, but we were talking about food sharing. I mean, is there some context in which we could share food? Is this something we can imagine? I mean, Diego really convinced me that this is central to social connections and social life and maybe empathy, but can we share food? Can we break brain?
Yes, I think so. And, one of the things I'm promoting is brains are very high in lipids. In fact, it's really a ketogenic diet. And it's kind of an interesting, my background is a geologist, so you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt when I talk about biological processes. But, the early development of ketogenic diet was for children with epilepsy because it's been shown to increase the energy production in the brain and protect neurons from epileptic seizures. And so I often consider some of the movements of the dyskinesia of zombies and wonder if there's a connection there. And that's why brains are craved so much.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. But do you feel that? Do you, do you have a brain craving, or you're not at that point yet?
Oh, no, definitely. I do. But I find, that I can eat, even vegan fat alternatives. I eat a lot of avocados. It's not quite helping my skin the way I ideally like, but it definitely does help. It gives me long-term energy. And so, I think they're all alternatives, and there's a lot of interest in these. I was not terribly interested in these diets previously, but I've gained an interest, and I think there are ways that we can do research on the roles of fats in diets that can benefit humans and zombies alike.
I really like this line of thought. It allows us to coexist, and so it would be a great future. The avocados is interesting because a lot of recent work has suggested that maybe some of the dispersers of avocados are actually predators. If you go to avocado orchards, they often have very high densities of wild cats. And so what if we can imagine orchards that both zombies and humans can feed on together? I think it's an interesting future.
Yeah,
Erica?
it's a wonderful segue into sharing food. So we will bring Diego back to join the conversation as well. Diego, welcome back to the broadcast.
Thanks.
Diego, have you ever wanted to ask a zombie something? Now's your chance. We're so far away. It's totally safe. And Gwyneth has a modest hunger for brains, but not even as extreme as it might be. So this is your moment.
I will say I was not expecting a zombie. I didn't think they were real, but boy, was I wrong. I was also not expecting them to be this coherent. But I am concerned. Like, can you smell brains? Do you how can you smell me coming far away from a distance? Like, do I need to watch out for your cravings?
Oh, definitely. But as long as I get a regular diet, then I find I'm able to, take care of my cravings.
So let's go. Oh, let's see. We have a question from Christopher Patton. Companies have fed off humans for hundreds of years, but we live in relative harmony with them. Gwen is convincing me the same balance can be found with zombies, especially conscientious ones.
Yes, and you are a very conscientious zombie, Gwen. Thank you for being a voice of zombie reason in these times.
Yeah, and there is some precedent. So, for instance, there's the case of the Tsavo man-eaters of Kenya. These were a pair of lions that were feeding on workers on a railroad. This has been made into no less than 6 movies, including a 1996 movie, The Ghost in the Darkness, with Val Kilmer and Michael Douglas. Little known fact, Stephen Hopkins, the director, was a zombie and explains many of his directorial choices. But what they have done subsequently is they killed these lions that were eating a number of people, and they're in the British Museum, and they were actually able to measure the carbon and nitrogen isotopes in the hair and bones of these lions and actually come up with estimates for how many humans they ate. So for instance, one ate about 10.5 humans. The other one probably ate about 24 humans, and that was probably because they had poor dental hygiene and some damage to the teeth. So humans became a more attractive prey animal for them.
It's an interesting segue because I feel like the public in general has a lot of empathy for and care about big cats. And so we want to conserve big cats. We're very worried when they become rare. And yet they have a lot of the same traits that zombies have. And so how do you account for the very different relationship we seem to have between zombies versus, say, leopards? Or is it proximity? What's going on there?
I think a lot of people just have too much identification with zombies. There's the fear that, any one of you could become like me. And so this often results in kind of two different modes, either a great deal of empathy or just revulsion. And in fact, Erica, I have a little clip I was hoping you could show that addresses some of this.
Absolutely. Diego also does empathy research, so it'd be great to get both of your perspectives after this.
Hey, what are you guys doing? This is for geeks. Our people go over there.
It's a temperature. I'm infected.
Our people go in that row over there. We don't burn them. We bury them. Understand?
So I chose this clip just because it really illustrates, that, we were humans. And in fact, we had families and loved ones. And in fact, I would even might be so bold as to say we were, or I am loved by my family. My sister, whom I infected, is not very happy, but I do hope that someday she'll forgive me and that we can still have a relationship. But I think that, working closely together, we can develop empathy between humans and zombies.
Diego, can you tell us a little bit about how the study of empathy might help us think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So empathy, it's really good for helping us care about other people, but it's also really good about helping us care about the people that we care about, and in turn hating the outgroup. And so not only, so we empathize with people who are like us, who look like us, those that are related to us, that we have previous experiences with. And I think, as Gwyneth was saying earlier, you may not want to foster, sometimes you may not want to foster empathy because it could potentially backfire. Or empathy for whom? It's possible that you have somebody empathize with Gwyneth. They may humanize her more, but it's also possible that they may consider all of the ways in which they may harm the people that are closer to you as well.
So we have a comment from an evolutionary biologist here that says that zombies aren't another species unless the agent of zombification inserted new DNA in the germline. So zombies are still human. They're just a sort of a different state of humanity.
Diego, does that play into how you think about the empathy, or it still relates to what you just said?
The comment?
Yeah.
I think, I'm not sure if that sounds objectively true to me, but I think the cues that we are receiving from the looks would tell us otherwise.
True. So she has a follow-up question, and it's kind of like, how interdependent are we with zombies, and maybe does that impact the empathy that we have for them? So Gwyneth and her sister, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that depends on what kind of zombie, right? So we could be negatively interdependent. Either zombies are going to eat with or eat us, in which case we really shouldn't be empathizing with them. We could also be have no interdependence with them, depending on interactions. Do you think that we can develop a positive interdependent relationship? And if so, what are the benefits of fostering a positive interdependent relationship with zombies and humans?
Well, you often do see, zombies do have a role to play. We have some unique characteristics: the insensitivity to pain, the ability to survive and despite loss of limbs and other organs. And you frequently see this as zombies are used as essentially weapons against other humans. And I would even argue at that point it's those humans that are being the most inhumane and not the zombies, because they're intentionally doing things like putting swords through them to make them more dangerous. So there are also might be more positive ways that zombies' unique biological characteristics could prove useful. We could go in noxious environments that would be that would be lethal for a normal human, and we would be fine. So there may be ways that we can develop some rather niche but unique characteristics that would allow us to coexist.
Yeah,
I think that would be great. Oh, sorry.
We have another comment that's kind of building off of that, about compassion and the importance of sort of coexisting together. And there are examples in media from the before times. So if we can kind of draw on that and how we're approaching things now.
Yeah, I just wanted to reply to Gwyneth's earlier point and to a comment in the audience that, we can sort of work around the negative effects that empathy may have, and just think about or remind people that we may be positively interdependent with zombies. And so directly going to the source of what may lead to positive interactions would be to remind us of the positive interdependence, regardless of whether we feel empathy with zombies, which might be hard to hardwire because we have all these barriers that prevent us from feeling empathy with people that look very different from us.
So Diego, would you and Gwyneth like to develop some kind of relationship with interdependence that would allow you to both persist and coexist? Do you think that reduces the chance that you'll be eaten by zombies? And is this something you're personally interested in, or is this just an academic thing? You're happy for other people to develop these relationships, but you're here in your sealed up house and just going to keep the zombies outside?
I think I need a sample size greater than 1 to make any kinds of conclusions. This one is the first zombie that I met. I say I'm pleasantly surprised and open-minded to learn more about how zombies and humans can cooperate further. After this interaction, I would not go and say, yes, kill all of them, but I would need to learn more about them.
Well, I feel my work here is done, if that I've made at least the positive impact on at least one person.
Excellent. Well, it's been so great to talk to you both. And this all reminds me about our broader relationship with other species and nature and the ways in which we think about sharing the earth with other species and empathy for those species. And I think these same ideas are in play as we look around us more generally.
Yeah, thank you both for joining us today on Eat, Pray, Run. And thank you all out there for sampling our brains today. If you are registered for ZAM 2020, make sure that you run over to your interactive workshops from 11 a.m. to noon. You can check your TV guide and just click through to the link for the one that you registered. Until next time, eat well, everyone.
I know it's crazy, but it seems so logical. I can't deny that there is something supernatural with you.